Hello everyone, welcome to this video. So this is just a quick video on the startup and shutdown procedures for the Schweizer 300 Cbi. So I wanted to walk through that. It's not terribly involved, but it's just something that you have to do obviously every time you want to fly this helicopter. Standard disclaimers apply. This is not meant to substitute for flight instruction if you're trying to fly this actual helicopter. If you're flying it in X-Plane 11, as I am doing here, I'm flying X-Plane 11 on Linux with the vSkylabs Schweizer 300 Cbi. So I want to go over the procedures. Okay. So here we are, we're in the helicopter. First thing we want to do is want to make sure that all of our controls are centered. So I've got my cyclic here. You can see it. It's almost off the screen. You can hear when I move it, it actually squeaks a little bit. So you want to have that centered. You want to have the frictions on. You know, same thing with my pedals. Pedals are nicely centered, and I can also look at my collective. So my collective is down, and you can see here that it moves freely. Now the collective friction, there's this knob here which I can pull back. If I pull it back to increase that friction, it will also essentially lock the collective down in the actual helicopter. So I'm going to go ahead and release that tension, or that friction, I should say. As far as the frictions for my cyclic controls, I have a couple of knobs, and this might be a little bit hard to see here in my simulator, but if I look just in front of the cyclic, there will be a knob that adjusts my pitch, tension, and then there's one to the side that will adjust my friction for rolling movements of the cyclic. Okay, so I've got all of my things locked down. And now I'm ready to look at starting up my checklist. I have my seat belts on. That's my seat belt. And if I have any passengers, they also have their seat belts on. My glove box door is closed. So that's right down here. By the way, in the sim, I can actually open this glove box and pull out a checklist, which I'm not going to do today, but that is an option if you're flying this in the simulator. Okay, and there's no junk in that center console that's going to cause me any kind of grief, so that's good. So what comes next? I can release those control frictions, and I want to go ahead and cycle through my controls, make sure everything moves freely, and it does seem to. And my collective is down, the friction is on, everything is centered, friction is on. Now, if I look at the official checklist, it'll tell me to go ahead and set my altimeter at this point. Although honestly, you'll have plenty of time to do this later while you're warming up the engine and such. So I'll go ahead and do that now. My altimeter set, and I want all of my switches off, possibly with the exception of my beacon. I'm going to go ahead and turn the beacon on now. And why am I going to do that? Well, in aviation, it's kind of a universal symbol for, hey, I'm about ready to start little spinny choppy things when you have your beacon on. So that warns other people, probably not a good time to approach this particular aircraft because something might start moving soon. So we have that on. All the other switches are off. My throttle is closed. And my mixture is out. So my mixture switch is all the way out here. And now I will turn on my battery switch. So my battery switch is on. And because it's a little dark, I'll also turn on the lights for my panel. All right, I want to check my fuel quantity. Do I have enough to make this flight? Well, I'm not going anywhere, which is good because it looks like I have maybe 5 gallons of fuel here. Next on my list is checking my lights. So I have here my low voltage light. I can push to test my other lights, as well as my low RPM horn. And all of that seems to be working. Okay. Now I want to check my clutch switch. My clutch switch is disengaged and the guard is off, as it should be. The clutch warning light is on. And my clutch auto engage is set to slow. There's an option of slow and fast. Honestly, I don't know anyone that's ever used the fast setting. I think most people use the slow setting. It's a little bit easier on things. All right, so now we're ready to start the engine. So how does that going to go? Well, I've got the mixture knob out, and I'm going to go ahead and put the fuel valve in. So I'm going to push this in. By the way, it's not unusual for people to leave this in all the time. The official checklist does say to pull this out when you're done, but just FYI, you might find it already in. Okay, so now it says throttle, close, and then open a 1/2 inch, which I think is kind of funny because it's a rotary throttle. So I'm not sure what a 1/2 inch is even supposed to mean. It really should be a certain number of degrees, but close it and then just roll on a little bit of throttle and you should be fine. And now we want to turn on the fuel boost pump. So go ahead and turn that on. And I should see a couple of things. I should see my fuel pressure come up and I should hear the fuel boost pump. Recently, I went to fly a helicopter and we didn't fly because we hit the switch and nothing happened because the pump was dead. So we ended up not flying that day. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to prime the engine. So we want to put a little bit of fuel in the cylinders so that when we go to start it here in a bit, it will actually ignite that fuel and start going. So what we do is we push our mixture in and we count to 3. So 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, and we pull it back out. And we turn off the fuel pump. So now it's been primed. And we can turn our magnetos on to the both position. And in just a second, we're going to first of all close our throttle. So we're back to idle. We're going to look around. We're going to say, all right, is anybody there? I am clear to the left. There's nobody there. What about looking to the right? I am also clear to the right. So nobody's around. That's good. I can also yell clear if I see anybody around me. And I'm ready to engage the starter. So the starter button is located on the collective. And as soon as the engine starts, I want to throw the mixture in. Now, if I have a look at the collective here in the sim, it's slightly different from the real collective. And the reason for that is very simple. This has a governor. The actual aircraft does not have a governor, but the sim version of this aircraft does have a governor. Why would you want that? Well, I don't recommend that you fly with the governor in the sim unless you never intend on flying the actual aircraft. So the actual aircraft has a correlator. So if I raise the collective, it will increase the throttle. And if I drop the collective, it will decrease the throttle. So in another video, I kind of showed, how I recommend you hold the collective. I don't want to get into that again here. You can go watch that other video. It's a video on flying the pattern in this helicopter. All right, so because there's this governor, which doesn't exist in the actual helicopter, the end of this collective is slightly different. On the actual aircraft, there's a button right on the end where this box is. And you push that button and it engages the starter. By the way, speaking of actual aircraft, sometimes you push that starter and nothing happens. Just keep on pushing it for a couple of seconds and then suddenly it will engage the starter. It's just a little quirk of these particular helicopters. All right. So I am ready to go here. I'm going to go ahead and hit the starter, and then I will engage my mixture. I will bring it full rich as it starts. So here we go. All right. So now the engine is running. So as soon as I have my engine running, what do I want to do next? I want to turn on my alternator, and I'm going to go ahead and start a timer. And if I look at the manual, it tells me to check a couple of things. First of all, it says stabilize the RPMs at 1400. So let me throttle up just a little bit here. 1400 RPMs. And check the oil pressure. You have 30 seconds to get the pressure, get your minimum pressure, and I'm there. Alternator switch is on, and the low voltage warning light went on. So the only warning light I have now is low RPMs, which is appropriate. And I am waiting for this engine to get warmed up. So what am I trying to do here? Well, a helicopter is a little bit different from an airplane if you have any experience flying an airplane. And how is it different? Well, one way that it's different is in an airplane, we start the engine and, we taxi around, we do our pre-flight checks, and then we take off, and, maybe things are kind of starting to get into the green ranges on our instruments. Well, a helicopter is different, because you're taking off as soon as you move, unless you have a wheeled helicopter. They do exist, but the Schweizer is not one of them. So what are we doing here? Well, we started this timer because we really want a minimum of a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes of time in order to allow things like the cylinder head gauge to start to indicate. Now on a cold day in the actual helicopter, it's not going to get up into the grain range until you start increasing the RPMs and actually engaging the rotors, etc., etc. And in that case, you want to see some sort of movement. Right? It might be right down here at the bottom, and it might start twitching a little bit. Now in the simulator here, it's kind of warming up a lot quicker than it would in real life, especially with the temperatures that I have today. Okay, so I'm waiting for this to come up. While I'm waiting, I could be doing things like checking my weather. I could be listening to ATIS or AWAS if I have it available. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my radio and my transponder. It's technically not until later on my checklist, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and turn that up. Okay, so it's been 2 minutes. I see some movement here. My temperatures are starting to come up. So now I want to go ahead and engage the rotors. Now on the 300 Cbi, this is a little bit different from some of the older helicopters that this is based on. And it's different because there's an automatic clutch system. And the way this works, it's very easy to use. Basically, all I need to do is take my switch, and I'm going to go all the way up to engage, hold that for 3 seconds, and then go to the middle. And this green light should come on telling you that the auto engage system for the clutch has been activated. Now, in the actual helicopter, what you're going to see is that this red light might blink, because what it's going to do is it's going to pulse that clutch in. It's going to do it in stages. You know, if you look at the manuals for the older versions of this helicopter, it'll say, 1500 RPMs on the tack, which is where we started. I guess I didn't explicitly mention that. We had stabilized at 1400, and then we bumped up the RPMs just a little bit. And it says, all right, engage it, and then when the RPMs drop 100, go to hold, the middle position. And when it stabilizes, then go back to engage. When it drops 100, then go back to hold. And keep on doing that until the needles are superimposed as they are now. So you'll notice that the green line has gone out and the red light has gone out. So now what you want to do is flip the switch all the way up and put the guard on. Like so. So now the rotor is engaged, everything is working as it should, and we want to do our engine ground checks. So we're going to run our throttle up to 2000 RPMs. I'm going to do that nice and gently here. And now we're going to raise our collective so that we can have 2000 RPMs and 15 inches of manifold pressure. So there's a couple of ways you can try to do this. You can set the RPMs at 2000, and you can just slowly raise the collective. And as you raise the collective, manifold pressure will go up, and the RPMs will go down. Just a little bit more. Right about there. Alright, so now I got 2000 RPMs and 1500, or 15 inches of manifold pressure, I should say. I can do my mag check, and I'm going to go 2 clicks, click, click, the right magneto, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, and I want to verify it did not drop more than 125 RPMs in 5 seconds. All right, I go back to both, and I like it to stabilize. I go 1 click, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, and again, less than 125 RPMs were lost, and I go back to both again. By the way, I always like to teach people to go 2 clicks, back to both, 1 click, back to both. And simple reason for that, you're much less likely to accidentally leave it on 1 mag if you're going further with the first check than the second check. So that's just a little tip, something I've always taught in my 19 years as CFI, airplanes, and now helicopters as well. Okay, so that looked great. So I'm going to go full down on the collective, and I'm going to close the throttle and watch for a needle split. So I close the throttle and see how the needles split. The rotor isn't spinning down as quickly as is the engine. And I can go ahead and put my frictions on. Next thing I want to do is I want to check my VNE chart. You know, VNE is at most 94 knots in this helicopter. It will vary with pressure, altitude, and temperature. So you can go ahead and have a look at that chart, which is way up here. It's kind of hard to read, but there it is. Normally, at least where I'm flying, it seems like it's always 94. But again, do check the chart. Okay, so we verified our VNE, and we verified that all of our warning lights are out. We have sufficient fuel to do nothing, which is what we're trying to do here. And now all of our gauges are actually in the green. Fuel pressure is in the green. Cylinder head, temperature, oil temperature, and oil pressure are all in the green range, which is what we want before we even think about taking off. All the switches are in their appropriate places. The fuel valve is still in. The mixture is still full rich. The clutch switch is engaged and the guard is closed. And now we turn on the fuel boost pump. So the fuel boost pump is coming on. We're almost ready to take off. Before we take off, we want to make sure that all of the warning lights are out. And we're looking for 2,700 RPMs on the gauges, and one last check that everything is in the green. So I'm just going to make a short hop here, because this is not about how to actually fly it. This is about how do you start it up and shut it down. Okay, so we went out and we had a flight. And we landed. So what's my after landing checklist? First thing, collective down, frictions on. Alright. And I want to start my timer. Go back to my timer. Reset it. And start my time. So I have everything centered, my frictions are on. I can turn off my radio, turn off my landing light if I was using it. Again, some people will leave these things on, So follow whatever procedure you're using locally. Fuel boost pump comes off. Transponder is off. So now shutting down, I want to come up to 2,000 RPMs. And I want to run 2,000 RPMs for at least 2 minutes. So in this case, after my flight, I came all the way down to idle. You know, normally I would just come down to 2,000 RPMs and then start my timer. And I'm looking for a CHT that's stable and declining below 300 degrees Fahrenheit. So I want that to happen for 5 minutes, you know, whichever these occurs first. So, you know, if it's a hot day, I might never get below 300, but never less than a minute. A lot of people would say not less than 2 minutes on this procedure. So I got another minute to wait. My CHTs are already below 300, and that looks pretty good. And why are we doing this? Well, we don't want to just go right from a really high power setting that we probably used when we just came into land. Maybe we were flying around in a hover for a while, using a lot of power, and go from that to nothing. You know, it's kind of hard on the engine. So we're going to give it a little bit more time, and once we get to 2 minutes, we'll close our throttle, and then we'll get ready to shut things down. So we're coming up on our 2 minutes. We'll go ahead and close the throttle. And I'm going to release my clutch. And I'm going to wait until my rotor RPMs drop below 100. And once they drop below 100, then I'm going to go ahead and kill the engine by pulling the mixture. Again, we are just gently shutting this thing down. We're not just going to say, hey, you went from full power to no power. Very, very bad for the engine. We like to be nice to our engines because they tend to be nice to us back. Coming up on that 100 RPMs. There's no rotor brake on this helicopter, but I'll show you how you can somewhat speed up the process of stopping the rotor. Alright, so we're at 100 RPMs now. I'm going to pull the mixture out. Alright, so engine is dead. Rotor RPMs are going to continue to decay. So mixture is out. Magnetos go to off. Alternator switch goes off, and we're waiting for the rotor to stop. Now if I put in a little left pedal, it will help that rotor decay a little faster. It's basically going to create more drag, if you will, because it's going to try to drive that tail rotor at a higher pitch, and it's going to take a little bit more energy to do that. And it just helps me slow down a little bit quicker. So I'm just waiting right now for everything to stop. Once it stops, I can go ahead and turn off all of my switches. Again, some people will leave the beacon on all the time. I'm not against that. I don't think it's a bad idea at all, honestly, to just leave it be. All right, so the rotor's barely turning now. And I realize that you can't necessarily see it so much in this particular video other than looking at the tach. But, you know, I can see the shadow of this rotor as it's turning here. Okay, so my rotor has finally come to a stop. And now what am I going to do? I'm going to go ahead and turn off my battery switch. I will turn off my panel light switch. I'm going to leave the beacon on. And, you know, if you look at the official manual, it's going to say go ahead and pull the fuel switch out as well. So that is how you do a startup and a shutdown in a Schweizer 300 Cbi.